All right, if you were one of those people that, was in the comments of the trailers hating, if you were one of those people that went on Rotten Tomatoes and was review bombing, and if you was one of those people that was just hating on Riri because she's a black excellence, black genius, black woman lead, this video ain't for you. If you love black superheroes, black women genius superheroes, and just black storytelling, then this video is for you. Getting into it, getting down to business as quick as we can. We're here to talk about none other than Ironheart. Ironheart, follows Riri Williams in her journey after her time in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Um, and when I was first watching it, I was like, man, it really is giving like she is struggling to get that feeling that, creating and inventing and doing science and technology in Wakanda was so peak for her that, she can't necessarily recreate that in the United States because, as she so frequently puts, she doesn't have the money that the Tony Starks and the Hank Pyms have access to. Which, it provides a bit of realism to the story. It definitely that provides a bit of realism to the story. I thought it was going to be another installment in the Marvel grief saga, and it was. I'm not going to lie, it was, but the way that they used the grief and weave the grief in and out of the story was done better than I think we have seen in the other installments of the past saga since Endgame. But that's just my personal opinion. I think that the grief that we saw from characters like Wanda, characters like even Shuri, even Shuri, I think sometimes that grief was misplaced, but I think that the grief depiction and how Riri was able to work through that grief with the AI version of her friend, and how that story progressed throughout the 6 episodes. I think that it was really, really great storytelling. I'm glad that they went back to the drawing board so many times because for once I feel like they have gave us a perfect story for short form content. I will say this, the ending, the cliffhanger, the ending, it leaves you wondering whether she made the deal or did not make the deal. I think that cliffhanger maybe could have been resolved with the end credit or the post credit or whatever. But hopefully we do get that resolved and we're not just in limbo like we have been with Shang-Chi and Moon Knight and some of those other characters. Getting into the meat and potatoes of the show, I think that, you know, a big concern for me particularly was how were they going to, she's Ironheart. She's the new generation Iron Man, if that makes sense. She's the new mind, she's the new suit. So how are they going to pay homage to the original, but being original, if that makes sense? I liked the inclusion of Ezekiel. I was absolutely on goal. I was absolutely applauding when I finished last week and he revealed himself to be Ezekiel Stain, son of Obadiah Stain. I thought it was a little bit cheesy, when he was like, "Oh, I got an ironmonger for a father," but I still liked, that callback that didn't feel like a reach to uh the Iron Man 1, what started the MCU. Like literally Iron Man 1. Um I don't necessarily like the upgrades that he ended up making to himself. Uh I think that we kind of already saw that storyline in Iron Man 3 with the the guy that was calling himself the Mandarin I can't remember his name, but we know that guy, the guy who had the fire stuff.
All right, let's go. You breathe fire? Okay.
Yeah, that guy. But I really liked, that this was about, her finding her identity within the suit. How it started with, she had the MIT suit, then it went back to her ragtag beat up suit, then she ended up making a new suit. I like that, this was she didn't have a a cave scene.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
But still going home to the trenches of Chicago and having to figure out your identity. I really liked the way that the story progressed. It definitely, in my opinion, mirrored that early Iron Man arc. I liked the role that her community, her family played in the story. Her mom, just wanting her to open up and ask for help and rely not just on her own talent and her own mental prowess, but rely on your people, your village, your community to help you. I definitely like the little boy with the wagon. His comic relief was hilarious. And when it was doing the montage in the second half of the show, and he said, "I'm just here to get the payment on my wagon. You owe me about $600." I thought that his comic relief was incredibly placed, especially for a young black boy in the community. I thought that that was awesome. I thought that even the relationship with Xavier was really cool. Her, obviously he was definitely intended to be the love interest, and I'm glad that they explored that in a way that it didn't take from the Ironheart story, if that makes sense. He was there to support her and remind her that, hey, just because you have this, intellectual ability, it doesn't mean that you can't be, open and vulnerable with others. And then I really liked the inclusion of the Stanton, the mom and the daughter, the Stantons, as sorcerers. Man, what a pull. I was talking with someone about, how could they uh include the magic without, us, or what would be the source of the magic? Because I'm not going to give away too much yet. If you've seen it already, but I'm going to get to that in my progression of talking. But how can they, fight the villain with magic without a magic source? And then I went back and I watched the trailer because I actually didn't watch the trailers in the promo. I didn't want any expectations of the show. I just wanted to watch it with a blank slate and just experience it. So after episode 3, and I was talking with people, and we saw that there was astral projection that was going to be in the show. I was like, okay, there has to be a sorcerer, but who? Strange is occupied, Wong is occupied. Mordo, we haven't seen Mordo in our main MCU timeline since Doctor Strange 1. So I was like, who is going to be the sorcerer? So I thought that that was really cool that we had two black lady sorcerers. Shout out to Cree Summer. She's the GOAT. She's been in the game for a really long time. Um, so I thought that that was really cool. Um, and I personally, this is my personal opinion. I think that what I was expecting, it might have been too much to do. But I think, especially since, seeing on TikTok that Robert Downey Jr. was helping promote the show, I think that I was expecting uh, Robert Downey's Doom to appear in the show and give her some guidance on how to use her tech with magic. Because if you don't know, currently in the comics, Doctor Doom is the Sorcerer Supreme. And we don't really see anyone else combine tech and magic the way that she did in the show, other than Doctor Doom. So that is what I was personally hoping for and expecting when I saw that astral projection in the trailer. But what we got was just as good. And they even name dropped, Kamartash, they even dropped Doctor Strange. So I thought that that inclusion of the sorcerers, of the two black lady sorcerers, was awesome. And just the overall imagery of Chicago, when they showed I think it was several times they showed Xavier's room. He had the red, black, and green flag behind him. They had my man Saba. They had my man Saba in episode 2. I think that they did a really good job of showcasing, our culture in full effect for this story. It was a beautiful, beautiful story that, like I said, I'm glad that they went back to the drawing board several times and, found a way to tell this story. And last but not least, before I get into, the grit, the hefty part, um, I want to say that I was expecting just she addressed it. Riri herself addressed it when she was talking to AI Natalie. Um, you know, you can't just call up Shuri and say, "Hey, I'm wrapped up in some magical nonsense because I wanted to roll with some criminals." But I personally, this is just what I was expecting because her story was already tied up to Wakanda. I was hoping, I was expecting, wishing for someone. It didn't have to be Shuri, but someone from Wakanda to appear and maybe help and assist. But the little reference to it and like girl get a grip moment that they had with it, I was okay with that as well. You know I think that they did a really good job of connecting this particular story to the whole of the MCU while keeping it grounded at that street level. Like we stretched all the way back to Iron Man 1. She mentioned Stark, she mentioned Pym, she even mentioned Kree. We know Kree. I didn't watch Secret Invasion. I heard that it wasn't good, so I didn't watch it. But that's Scrolls. That's Captain Marvel stuff. So they did a really good job, especially when you're dealing with that tech, man, of connecting her to the whole of the MCU, but we were grounded in Chicago. We were grounded in Chicago. So I thought that this 6 episode series, Ironheart, was fire. And just getting into what the show, the action part of the show. Riri, she needed money, man. That that realism part of it, she needed that money to do what she wanted to do. And she's approached by the hood and his cousin.
You boys twins? Nah, we cousins.
She was approached by him, and it was an opportunity that she may or may not have had you know the wisdom to pass up on. I'm going to say wisdom, and I'll get to that. And in the midst of it, she sees that the hood has powers where, he can basically appear and reappear when he's wearing the hood, and he can, bend the bullets to his command. I was all When I first saw that, I was like, okay, it's giving Yandu. But obviously we weren't that far connected to the rest of the MCU. So, we see that the hood is basically corrupting the guy Parker's body. He's getting covered in these black veins. And when you're dealing with magic, we've only seen one really big bad in magic so far. Really two, but I know how y'all feel about her, so I'm not gonna count her. Uh which is Dormammu. And that's who they were expecting to fight. But it's revealed that the big bad, who is the biggest bad of this of the story arc, who is controlling the hood, is revealed to be Mephisto. And Mephisto is basically the devil. And I think that they did a really good job of showcasing that he is the devil. And when you make a deal with the devil, you know, first of all, the terms are unclear. Second of all, you're riding in this wave and you just don't know, you know, when you want to stop, and you become dependent upon it. I think that the last episode or two, we really saw that, Parker, he was being definitely, I want to say manipulated, but he was definitely being used. His soul was being taken from him. In the last fight that he had against Riri, he was turning into a beast, a hellhound looking thing. And I think that, getting into this darker areas of magic, it definitely opens up the MCU again. The MCU as a whole opens up to more because you do have Scarlet Witch, and I don't mean Wanda. I do mean Scarlet Witch. I mean Darkhold. You do have evil Doctor Strange out there. You have evil Mordo. Mordo is still out there. Mordo is there, and so I think that we're getting into, the meat and potatoes of the magic realm. And like I said too, do not sleep on Doom. And so I think that what this story represented, coinciding at the end with Riri herself, you know, whether she made the deal or not, to me personally, is unclear. I'm not going to say that I know for certain that she made the deal until I see what comes next. I'm going to hope and pray that she didn't make the deal. I'm going to hope that, as the last episode title was, "The Past is the Past," is, that's what it was. She chose not to make that deal. But if she did, she did, and I think it goes, it goes back to that grief. The grief was so woven into the story that even if she did make the deal, your understanding of it. So I'm interested to see, what is next for Ironheart. But it was definitely a great series. If you know anybody who's hating, tell them to, pull their head out their butt and suck it up and watch it. It was great. It was definitely great show, great soundtrack, great vibes. I give it, this is gonna be high for me, but I'm gonna give it like a 9, simply because I just don't like what Zeke did, what Ezekiel Stain did to himself, and I don't like the cliffhanger. But other than that, man, I think that the show was perfect. I think that the show was absolutely amazing. Hopefully, Marvel keeps the ball rolling. To me, this has been the second the second most enjoyable project in a while, coming second only to Daredevil. I really, was a fan of Daredevil Born Again. Um, but Ironheart, man, I was really impressed. I was really impressed. So hopefully Marvel keeps the ball rolling. Hopefully y'all keep tuning in, my fellow sages. And hopefully something else noteworthy for me to review comes out soon. Appreciate y'all.